The forest had always been witness to her solitude. Lyria Moonthorn moved through the skeletal trees like a shadow cast by winter light, her white hair catching the pale afternoon sun, her red dress a splash of defiance against the muted landscape. She carried an axe over her shoulder, its worn handle familiar in her grip. The cold bit at her skin, but she welcomed it. Pain had become a companion, a reminder that she was still here, still breathing, still human in a world that demanded more. She had never shifted, not once, not in all her years. While others felt the awakening of their wolves in adolescence, felt the wild surge of power and belonging that came with transformation, Lyria had remained locked in this single form, human, incomplete, a puzzle missing its most essential piece. The whispers had followed her through childhood, through the loss of her mother, through every lonely night when she wondered if something inside her was simply broken beyond repair. But she had never hidden, never cowered. She worked, she helped, she survived. And she honored the memory of the woman who had loved her unconditionally, the mother who had died when Lyria was still too young to understand that some absences never heal. The axe bit into wood with a satisfying crack. Lyria gathered the split logs methodically, her breath misting in the frigid air. Winter was coming in earnest, and fire would be her salvation through the long nights ahead. She had learned early that survival required preparation, that loneliness was easier to bear when your hands were busy and your purpose clear. Then the silence shattered. A scream tore through the forest, raw and terrified, the sound of someone facing death and finding it unbearable. Lyria's heart lurched. She dropped the axe and ran, her feet flying over roots and frozen earth, the red of her dress streaming behind her like a banner of war. She found them in a clearing, where the trees grew sparse and twisted, as if the earth itself recoiled from what stood there. An elderly woman, frail and silver-haired, cowered against a massive oak. Around her, circling with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run, were skeletal warriors. Their bones gleamed white and terrible, animated by something ancient and wrong. Wisps of dark magic clung to them like smoke, and their empty eye sockets blazed with unnatural light. The old woman's eyes met Lyria's, wide with terror and fading hope. Lyria didn't think. She charged. Her fists were pathetic against bone and sorcery. She kicked. She fought. She threw herself between the woman and the blades that swung with mechanical precision. But she was human. Just human. And the skeletons were relentless. One knocked her aside with contemptuous ease. She tasted blood, felt ribs bruise, heard the rattle of animated death closing in. The largest skeleton raised its corroded blade high above the old woman, who had squeezed her eyes shut, lips moving in what might have been prayer or farewell. No. The word erupted from somewhere deeper than thought, deeper than fear. It came from a place Lyria had never known existed, a cavern inside her soul that had been waiting, silent and patient, for this exact moment. Not again. I will not lose another mother. The world exploded into golden light. Pain and ecstasy tore through her in equal measure as her body remade itself. Bones shifted, reformed, muscles elongated and strengthened. Her skin rippled with the emergence of silver-white fur that gleamed like moonlight on snow. Her senses sharpened until she could hear the whisper of wind through distant branches, smell the decay clinging to the cursed skeletons, taste the wild freedom of transformation on her tongue. Lyria Moonthorn, who had never shifted, who had spent her entire life feeling incomplete, became whole. Before we begin the story, I want to thank everyone who supports the channel and loves our Alpha King romances. In the pinned comment, you'll find a special selection of the best Amazon audiobooks that inspire our stories. If you purchase any audiobook through those links, you'll be directly supporting the channel and helping us create more stories. Tell us where you're watching from and how old you are in the comments. I hope you enjoy the story. Her wolf was magnificent. larger than she had any right to be, wrapped in an aura that pulsed golden and pure, as if the sun itself had chosen to crown her. Ancient. That was the word that thundered through her newly awakened mind. Her wolf was ancient, a bloodline so old that it predated the curses and the kingdoms and the endless wars of succession. The skeletons hesitated. Then they attacked. They shattered like brittle glass against her fury. She tore through them with claws that blazed with golden fire, her jaws crushing bone to powder, her howl shaking the very foundations of the cursed magic that animated them. When the last skeleton fell, disintegrating into harmless ash, Lyria stood panting in the center of the clearing, her wolf still blazing with power, protective and fierce. She turned to the old woman, and the wolf inside her gentled instantly, recognizing something precious and fragile that needed to be protected at all costs. The woman stared at her with wonder, and tears streaming down her weathered face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Oh, child, thank you." Lyria shifted back, the transformation easier this time, as if her body remembered now what it had always been meant to do. She knelt beside the woman, checking her for injuries with careful hands. Cuts, bruises, the kind of damage that came from running through a hostile forest while pursued by nightmares. "What is your name?" Lyria asked softly, tearing strips from the hem of her red dress to bind the worst of the wounds. "Selka," the woman replied, her voice trembling. Selka Dawnshadow. The name meant nothing to Lyria. She knew little of the great families, the hierarchies of power that governed the Pact territories. She had lived on the margins for so long that the politics of alphas and councils seemed distant and irrelevant. "I'm Lyria," she said simply. "Can you walk?" Selka tried and nearly collapsed. Lyria caught her, supporting the old woman's weight with ease. The strength of her wolf still sang through her veins, making everything feel lighter, more possible. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Lyria said. "Somewhere warm." "I was separated from my guards," Selka explained, leaning heavily on Lyria's shoulder. "Days ago. I've been lost, wandering. Those things found me at dawn and have been hunting me ever since." Lyria built a fire as the sun began to set, using the skills her mother had taught her before death claimed her too soon. She wrapped Selka in her own cloak, gave her water from a nearby stream, and sat watch through the night. The old woman slept fitfully, occasionally crying out from nightmares, and each time Lyria would murmur soft reassurances until peace returned. Something shifted inside her during those long hours. Selka reminded her so painfully of her own mother. The same gentle strength, the same way of looking at her as if she were precious and valued and loved. Lyria had thought that part of her heart had died with her mother. Now she realized it had only been dormant, waiting for someone worthy to awaken it again. When dawn broke, Selka woke to find Lyria tending the fire, her white hair loose around her shoulders, her red dress torn but her posture unbowed. "You stayed," Selka said, and there was surprise in her voice, as if kindness had become foreign to her. "Of course I stayed," Lyria replied. "I'm not leaving you alone out here." Over the next 2 days, they traveled slowly through the forest. Lyria hunted, gathered, and cared for Selka with a tenderness that surprised them both. The old woman began to smile more, to share stories of her life, her children, the grandchildren she hoped to see again. Lyria listened and felt the empty spaces inside her begin to fill with something warm and healing. "You remind me of my own daughter," Selka said one evening, as they sat by the fire. "She had your strength, your fierce kindness." "Had?" Lyria asked gently. "She died in childbirth many years ago," Selka said, her eyes distant with old grief. "Left me with a grandson I love more than life itself, but the loss of her still aches." Lyria reached out and took the old woman's hand. "My mother died when I was very young. I barely remember her face anymore, just the feeling of being safe when she held me. Selka squeezed her hand. Then we are both orphans of a kind, you and I. Perhaps, Lyria said softly. Or perhaps we've found each other. On the third day, they encountered a patrol. 6 wolves emerged from the underbrush, powerful and alert, their eyes scanning for threats. When they saw Selka, they shifted immediately into human form, dropping to one knee in a gesture of profound respect. Matriarch, the leader breathed, his voice shaking with relief and disbelief. We thought we'd lost you. Selka smiled. You nearly did, Gareth. If not for this remarkable young woman, I would be nothing but bones feeding the forest floor. All eyes turned to Lyria. She felt their assessment, saw the moment they registered the golden aura that still clung to her like perfume. One of the younger wolves inhaled sharply. Her scent, he whispered. It's like sunlight and ancient stone. What is she? She is my savior, Selka said firmly, and there was steel beneath the gentleness. And you will treat her with the honor she deserves. They were escorted swiftly through the forest, the patrol forming a protective circle around Selka and Lyria. The old woman held Lyria's hand the entire journey, as if afraid she might disappear if released. The royal grounds emerged from the wilderness like a dream made solid. Massive stone structures blended with living wood, towers that reached toward the sky, courtyards filled with wolves in both forms going about their duties. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. A seat of power that had endured for generations. But Lyria felt no awe, only wariness. This was the world that had always looked at her and found her lacking. These were the people who had whispered about her failure to shift, who had treated her difference as a deficiency. They were led to a great hall where a man stood waiting, and Lyria knew instantly who he was. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. He was tall and heavily muscled, his long black hair pulled back from a face that could have been carved from granite. A beard framed a jaw set in lines of command and control. His eyes, dark and intense, swept the room with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Dry Stand Dawnshadow, the Alpha King. When he saw Selka, his entire demeanor shattered. The mask of authority fell away, revealing raw emotion beneath. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and pulled his mother into his arms with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so imposing. Mother, he breathed, and his voice cracked. I thought I'd lost you. I nearly was lost, Selka said, pulling back to cup his face with weathered hands. But this woman, this extraordinary woman, saved me. Dreesten's eyes found Lyria, and she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. He studied her with an intensity that made her want to shift uncomfortably, but she held her ground, lifting her chin in silent defiance. You have my eternal gratitude, he said, his voice formal but threaded with genuine emotion. Anything you need, anything you desire, it is yours. I need nothing from you, Lyria replied coolly. I didn't save her for a reward. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or respect. He nodded slowly. Even so, you have given me back what I treasure most. That debt can never be fully repaid. Over the following days, Lyria remained at the royal grounds at Selka's insistence. The old woman had latched onto her with a fierce affection, introducing her to everyone as the daughter of her heart, the miracle that had appeared when all hope seemed lost. You should stay, Selka said one morning as they walked through the gardens. Make this your home. I have a home, Lyria said gently. A small cottage on the edge of the territory. It's quiet. Simple. Lonely, Selka countered, her eyes too knowing. You've been alone for so long, dear heart. Let yourself be part of something larger. But Lyria resisted. The grandeur of the royal grounds felt suffocating, and everywhere she looked, she saw Dristan Dawnshadow watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. He made her uncomfortable in ways she couldn't articulate. He was everything she had learned to distrust. Powerful, commanding, the embodiment of a hierarchy that had never valued her. Still, she visited Selka often. The old woman's joy at seeing her was reward enough, and slowly, grudgingly, Lyria had to admit that she had found something here she had thought lost forever. A mother's love. A sense of belonging that had nothing to do with shifting or power or bloodlines. Selka, meanwhile, had developed a new obsession. She wanted Lyria to marry her son. "You would be perfect for him," she said one afternoon, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "And he needs someone who won't be intimidated by all that brooding authority." "I am not interested in your son," Lyria said firmly. "He's cold and distant, and everything I don't want in a partner." "He's lonely," Selka corrected gently. "There's a difference between cold and careful, dear heart. He's been hurt before, betrayed by those he trusted. It's made him wary." "Then he can stay wary," Lyria replied. "I'm not looking to fix a broken Alpha King." But Selka merely smiled, as if she knew secrets the universe had yet to reveal. Drystan, for his part, seemed content to observe from a distance. He attended the same meals, walked the same gardens, but always maintained a respectful space. Lyria told herself she was grateful for his restraint. She told herself his presence didn't affect her, that she didn't notice the way he gentled his voice when speaking to the children of the pack, or how his eyes softened when he looked at his mother. She told herself many lies during those first months. The months passed and the seasons began their slow turn toward autumn. Lyria fell into a rhythm, dividing her time between her cottage and visits to Selka. The old woman's health had improved dramatically since her rescue, as if having Lyria in her life had rekindled her will to thrive. They would sit for hours, Selka teaching Lyria the healing arts, the old songs, the history of the pack. Lyria would share stories of her mother, her childhood, the long years of solitude. A bond formed between them that transcended blood, built instead on choice and love and mutual rescue. "You saved my life," Selka said one day. "But you've given me so much more than that. You've given me a daughter again." Lyria's eyes burned with unshed tears. "And you've given me a mother. I thought that chapter of my life was closed forever." "Nothing is ever truly closed," Selka said, squeezing her hand. "Sometimes the universe just takes its time opening the next door." It was during one of these visits that Drystan approached her directly for the first time. She was leaving the residential wing when he fell into step beside her, his presence overwhelming in the narrow corridor. "Walk with me?" he asked, and it was a request, not a command. Lyria considered refusing, but curiosity won out. She nodded curtly. They walked in silence through the gardens, as twilight painted the sky in shades of amber and violet. Finally, Drystan spoke, his voice low and careful. "My mother loves you," he said. "I haven't seen her this happy in years, not since before my father died." "I love her too," Lyria replied, her tone guarded. "I know you don't trust me," Drystan continued. "I know you see me as some symbol of everything wrong with pack hierarchy and power structures. But I want you to know that I see you. I see how you care for her, how you ask for nothing in return. It's rare, precious." "I don't do it for recognition," Lyria said sharply. "I know," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her look at him. His expression was open, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "That's what makes it precious. You're not playing politics or angling for position. You simply love her because she's worth loving." Lyria didn't know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. "If you ever need anything," Drystan said quietly, "anything at all, you come to me. Not as Alpha King to subject, but as someone who owes you a debt that can never be repaid." He left her then, disappearing into the gathering darkness, and Lyria stood alone in the garden, wondering why her heart was beating so quickly. Autumn deepened into winter. Lyria continued her visits, and Drystan continued his careful, respectful distance. But she began to notice things. The way he ordered the kitchens to prepare Selka's favorite meals. How he would sit with his mother for hours, just holding her hand and listening to her stories. The fierce protectiveness in his eyes when anyone approached her too quickly or spoke too loudly in her presence. He was devoted to Selka. Utterly, completely devoted. And watching that devotion began to crack something in the walls Lyria had built around her heart. Selka noticed, of course. She noticed everything. "He's a good man," she said one day, apropos of nothing. "Fierce when he needs to be, gentle when it matters." "I'm sure he is," Lyria replied noncommittally. "He asks about you, you know. What you like, what makes you smile. He's trying to understand you." "He should stop wasting his time." Selka laughed softly. "Oh, dear heart, you can lie to yourself all you want, but you can't lie to me. I see the way you watch him when you think no one is looking." Lyria's cheeks flushed. It's all right to be afraid," Selka interrupted gently. "Love is terrifying, especially when you've been alone for so long, but running from it won't make you any safer. It will just make you lonelier." Lyria had no answer to that, so she changed the subject, and Selka let her, but the knowing smile never quite left the old woman's face. Spring arrived with a riot of blossoms and new life. The pack celebrated the season with festivals and hunts, and Lyria found herself drawn into the festivities despite her initial reluctance. Selka insisted, and Lyria had discovered she could deny the old woman very little. It was during one of these celebrations that Drystan asked her to dance. The great hall had been transformed with flowers and ribbons, music filling the air with joy and promise. Lyria stood on the periphery, watching the couples spin and laugh, when he appeared at her elbow. "Dance with me," he said, and this time it was neither request nor command but something closer to a plea. She should have refused, should have maintained her distance and her carefully constructed indifference, but Selka was watching from her seat of honor, hope shining in her eyes, and Lyria found she couldn't disappoint her. "One dance," she said. His hand was warm and calloused when it took hers, and he led her onto the floor with surprising grace for someone so large. They moved together in silence at first, the music swirling around them, and Lyria was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. "You're different than I expected," Drystan said finally. "How so?" "Stronger, fiercer, the way you face the world, like you're daring it to try and break you again." He paused. "It's remarkable." "I've had to be strong," Lyria replied. "No one else was going to fight for me." "I would fight for you now," he said quietly, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "If you'd let me." "I don't need a champion," Lyria said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Everyone needs someone," Drystan countered. "Even the strongest among us, especially them." The dance ended, and Lyria pulled away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She retreated to Selka's side, needing the comfort of the old woman's presence to ground her. "He cares for you," Selka said softly. "More than you realize." "It doesn't matter," Lyria replied, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Summer arrived with its warmth spreading across the land like a benediction. The days stretched long and golden, and the nights were soft with the songs of crickets and the whisper of leaves. Lyria found herself spending more time at the royal grounds, and though she told herself it was entirely for Selka's sake, she knew the truth was more complicated. She had begun to watch for him, to listen for his footsteps in the corridors, to feel her pulse quicken when she caught sight of his dark hair or heard his deep voice carrying through the halls. It frightened her, this growing awareness, this treacherous softening of her carefully maintained defenses. One evening, as the sun painted the western sky in brilliant shades of crimson and violet. She found him in the training yard. He moved through sword forms with lethal grace, his muscles flexing beneath sweat-slicked skin, and she stood transfixed by the deadly beauty of it. This was the Alpha King the world saw. Powerful, dangerous, unstoppable. Then he noticed her. His expression transformed instantly, the fierce warrior melting into something gentle and vulnerable. He set down the sword and approached her with careful steps, as if afraid she might bolt like a startled deer. "I didn't mean to disturb your training," Lyria said, cursing the breathlessness in her voice. "You could never be a disturbance," Dristan replied, his dark eyes intense. "You're a gift. Every moment I see you is a gift." She should have deflected, should have maintained her emotional distance. Instead, she found herself asking, "Will you walk with me?" They wandered through the gardens as twilight deepened around them. The air was heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and fireflies danced between the flower beds like fallen stars learning to fly. For a long time, they said nothing, content simply to exist in each other's presence. Finally, Dristan broke the silence. "Tell me about your mother," he said softly. "You mention her sometimes, but never in detail. I'd like to know her through your eyes." Lyria felt something crack inside her chest. No one had ever asked about her mother, not in all the years since her death. People had offered condolences, had spoken empty platitudes about time healing wounds, but no one had wanted to know the woman herself. "She was gentle," Lyria began, her voice thick with old grief. But there was steel beneath the softness. "She never shifted either, you know. I inherited that from her. The others whispered that we were cursed, that our bloodline was weak. But she never let it diminish her. She taught me to be kind when the world was cruel, to help when helping hurt, to love even when love seemed impossible." "She sounds remarkable," Dristan said. "She was," Lyria whispered. "She died of a fever when I was 8. I watched her waste away day by day, until there was nothing left but bones and determination. In her final hours, she made me promise to never hide, never apologize for what I was. She said that the right wolf would come when I needed it most, not before." "She was wise," Dristan said quietly. "And she was right. Your wolf came exactly when it was meant to." Lyria looked at him, really looked at him. "Tell me about your father," she said. "Selka mentions him sometimes, but you never do." Pain flickered across Dristan's face, but he didn't look away. "He was a good king and a terrible father," he said bluntly. "He loved the pack, loved his duty, but he had no room in his heart for softer things. My mother adored him anyway. She saw past the armor to the man beneath. I've always wondered if he even realized how lucky he was to have her." "Do you miss him?" Lyria asked. "I miss the father I wished he could have been," Dristan admitted. "The one who might have told me he was proud, who might have shown me that strength and compassion aren't opposing forces. Instead, he taught me that emotion was weakness, that love was a luxury kings couldn't afford." "But you don't believe that," Lyria said. "It wasn't a question." "No," Dristan agreed. "I've seen what happens when leaders rule without love. They build kingdoms that are strong but brittle, powerful but empty. I want something different. I want to build something that endures not because of fear, but because of loyalty freely given." "That's what you're doing," Lyria said softly. "I've watched you with your people. You're fierce with those who threaten them, but gentle with those who need protection. You listen. You care. That's rare in a ruler." Dristan stopped walking and turned to face her fully. The moonlight caught in his dark eyes, making them shine like polished obsidian. "Do you know why I care so much about doing it right?" he asked. Lyria shook her head. "Because when I look at you, when I see how you love my mother despite having every reason to protect your heart, When I watch you heal the sick and comfort the grieving without expecting anything in return, I understand what true strength looks like. And I want to be worthy of it. Worthy of you." Her breath caught in her throat. "Drystan." "I'm not asking for anything," he interrupted gently. "I'm not demanding you return what I feel. I just needed you to know that you've changed me, made me better. And I'm grateful for that, whatever else may come." Lyria felt tears prick her eyes. She had built such high walls, had convinced herself that letting someone in would only lead to devastation. But standing here in the moonlight with this man who ruled thousands, yet treated her like she was the only thing that mattered, she felt those walls beginning to crumble. "I'm afraid," she admitted, the words torn from somewhere deep and vulnerable. "I know," Drystan said. "So am I. Love is terrifying. It gives someone else the power to destroy you completely, but it also gives you the power to be more than you ever thought possible." "I don't know if I can do this," Lyria whispered. "Then don't decide tonight," Drystan replied. "Just let me walk beside you. Let me be your friend, if nothing else. The rest will unfold as it's meant to." They walked together until the moon reached its zenith, talking about everything and nothing, sharing laughter and comfortable silence in equal measure. And when they finally parted at Lyria's chambers, Drystan pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for trusting me with your mother's memory," he said. "It's a gift I don't take lightly." Lyria watched him walk away, her heart hammering against her ribs, and knew with sudden certainty that she was already lost. The question wasn't whether she would fall in love with Drystan Dawnshadow. The question was whether she could find the courage to let herself. The days that followed were a study in restraint and revelation. Drystan courted her with a patience that left her breathless. He brought her books on healing that he'd found in the royal library, ancient texts that contained knowledge long forgotten. He carved her a set of herb knives with handles shaped like wolves, the craftsmanship exquisite. He learned her routines and would appear at unexpected moments, always with some excuse that fooled neither of them. But he never pushed, never demanded. He simply offered himself, day after day, and let her choose how much she was willing to accept. Selka watched their dance with undisguised delight. "You're making him work for it," she said one afternoon as they sorted medicinal herbs. "Good. Men don't appreciate what comes too easily." "I'm not playing games," Lyria protested. "I'm just cautious." "Cautious is good," Selka agreed. "But don't be so cautious that you miss the miracle standing in front of you. My son is a good man, Lyria. He would lay down his life for you without hesitation. He would fight the world itself if it threatened you. That kind of devotion is rare." "It's overwhelming," Lyria admitted. "I've been alone for so long. I don't know how to let someone in like that." "You let me in," Selka pointed out gently. "That was different. You needed me." "And he doesn't?" Selka raised an eyebrow. "Child, he needs you more than you realize. He's drowning in responsibility and duty, and you're the only thing that reminds him he's allowed to be human, to feel, to want something beyond the good of the pack." Lyria was silent, processing that. "But more than that," Selka continued, her expression softening. "You need him too. You've been carrying your pain alone for too long. Let him help shoulder the burden. Let him remind you that you deserve to be happy." "What if I'm not enough?" Lyria whispered the fear that kept her awake at night. "What if he realizes that I'm just a woman who couldn't shift for most of her life, who has no family, no status, nothing to offer a king?" Selka set down the herbs and took Lyria's face in her hands. "Listen to me very carefully. You are not broken. You were never broken. You are a woman of such strength and compassion that when your wolf finally rose, it blazed with the light of ancient power. You saved my life when no one else could have. You love so fiercely that you treat a strange old woman like the mother you lost. And you make my son smile in ways I haven't seen since he was a boy. If that's not enough, then nothing in this world is." Tears spilled down Lyria's cheeks. "I don't know how to do this," she said brokenly. "One day at a time," Selka replied, pulling her into a warm embrace. "One choice at a time. And remember, dear heart, that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to try." That night, Lyria couldn't sleep. She paced her chambers, her mind churning with fear and hope and longing. Finally, she threw on a cloak and slipped outside, needing the cool night air to clear her thoughts. She found him on the battlements, staring out over the moonlit landscape. He didn't turn when she approached, but she saw the tension ease from his shoulders. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked quietly. "Too many thoughts," Lyria replied, moving to stand beside him. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching clouds drift across the face of the moon. "Can I ask you something?" Lyria said finally. "Anything." "Why me?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "You could have anyone. There are women of noble blood who would kill for your attention. Why pursue someone like me?" Dryston turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Do you want the pretty answer or the truth?" "The truth. Always the truth." "Because you see me," he said simply. "Not the Alpha King, not the title or the power or the responsibility. You see Drystan. The man who misses his father even though they never truly understood each other. The son who would do anything to protect his mother. The ruler who lies awake at night wondering if he's making the right choices. You see all of it, and you don't flinch." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something raw and vulnerable. "And because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to want something for myself. Not for the pack, not for duty, but just because it makes me happy. You make me happy, Lyria. You make me feel human again." Lyria felt something shift inside her, the last of her resistance crumbling. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Drystan confessed. "Terrified, actually. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the scratch of his beard against her palm, the warmth of his skin. "If we do this," she said slowly, "if I let myself fall, you need to understand something. I don't know how to do this halfway. When I love completely. And if you hurt me, I won't." Drystan interrupted fiercely. "I swear on everything I am, everything I have, I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of what you're offering." "You can't promise that," Lyria said. "People hurt each other. It's inevitable." "Then let me rephrase," Drystan said. "I will never deliberately hurt you. I will never betray your trust. I will fight for us, for this, with everything I have. And when we stumble, because we will, I promise to always come back to you, to talk, to listen, to find our way through together." Lyria looked into his eyes and saw the truth blazing there, saw his sincerity, his devotion, his desperate hope. And she made a choice. The same kind of choice she'd made in the forest when she refused to let Selka die. The choice to be brave, to risk pain for the possibility of something beautiful. She kissed him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was fierce and claiming. All the fear and longing and need she'd been holding back pouring into the touch. Drystan responded with equal intensity, his arms wrapping around her and pulling her close, as if he could press her into his very soul. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lyria was smiling through tears. "Is that a yes?" Drystan asked, his voice rough with emotion. "That's a yes," Lyria confirmed. "I'm still terrified, but yes, let's be terrified together." Drystan laughed, the sound joyous and free, and kissed her again. And again. And when they finally made their way back inside, hand in hand, Lyria felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Pure, undiluted hope for a future she had never dared to imagine. But Lyria still held back in some ways. She had been alone for too long, had learned too well that vulnerability led to pain. Old habits died hard, and sometimes she would catch herself pulling away when things felt too intense, too real. She told herself it was better this way, safer to keep part of her heart locked away where it couldn't be shattered completely. Drystan noticed, of course. He always noticed. But he didn't push, didn't demand more than she was ready to give. He simply loved her, patient and steady, and trusted that eventually she would find her way to him fully. Then came the night that changed everything. The moon was full and heavy in the sky, casting silver light across the forest. Lyria had gone to gather night-blooming herbs that Selka needed for one of her remedies. She had grown comfortable in these woods, confident in her ability to navigate them even in darkness. She didn't sense the danger until it was too late. They emerged from the shadows like nightmares given form. More skeletal warriors, dozens of them, their bones rattling with ancient malice. The curse that animated them was stronger this time, darker, as if whatever magic sustained them had grown more powerful. Lyria shifted immediately, her wolf blazing to life with golden fury. She fought with everything she had, claws and teeth tearing through bone. But there were too many. They pressed in from all sides, relentless and unyielding. A blade caught her shoulder, and she yelped in pain. Another struck her flank. She was strong, but even strength had limits, and she was rapidly approaching hers. Then she felt it. A presence in her mind, fierce and protective and utterly devoted. It took her a moment to realize it was Drystan, his consciousness touching hers through whatever bond had been forming between them over the months. He knew she was in danger. He knew she was hurt. And he was coming. He arrived like a storm given flesh. His wolf was massive, black as midnight, and twice as deadly. But it was the way he positioned himself that made Lyria's breath catch. He didn't attack immediately. He placed himself between her and the skeletons, his entire body a shield, and the message was unmistakable. You will have to go through me first. They fought side by side then, moving with a synchronicity that spoke of something deeper than strategy. Where she struck, he defended. Where he attacked, she covered his vulnerable spots. They were two parts of a whole, perfectly balanced, devastatingly effective. The golden aura that surrounded Lyria blazed brighter, merging with the dark power that emanated from Drystan. Light and shadow, moon and midnight, moving as one. The skeletons fell before them like wheat before a scythe, and when the last one crumbled to dust, they stood panting in the clearing, their wolves slowly receding. Lyria shifted back to human form, wincing at the pain in her shoulder. Before she could even assess the damage, Drystan was there, his hands gentle as they examined her wounds. "You're hurt," he said, and there was anguish in his voice. "I'm fine," she replied, but her voice shook. "You're not fine," he growled, but the growl held no threat, only concern. "Why didn't you call for help sooner?" "I didn't think I needed it," Lyria admitted. "I thought I could handle it alone." "You don't have to handle everything alone anymore," Drystan said fiercely, his eyes burning with emotion. "Don't you understand that? You have me now. You have my mother. You have a pack that would lay down their lives for you because of what you did for our matriarch. You're not alone, unless you choose to be." Something inside Lyria broke. Not in a painful way, but like ice cracking in spring, making way for new growth. Tears she hadn't known she was holding back spilled down her cheeks, and she didn't try to stop them. "I'm so tired of being afraid," she whispered. Drystan pulled her into his arms, careful of her injuries, and held her as she finally let herself cry for all the years of loneliness, all the nights she had convinced herself she was better off without anyone to lose. Then stop running, he murmured against her hair. Let yourself be loved, Lyria. Let yourself be cherished and protected and valued. You deserve all of that and more. She pulled back to look at him, really look at him. And for the first time, she saw past the armor he wore for the world. Saw the man beneath the king, the heart beneath the command. He was fierce, yes, and dangerous to his enemies. But with her, he was gentle, devoted, everything she had been too afraid to let herself want. I don't know how, she admitted. Then we'll learn together, Dristan said, cupping her face with hands that could crush stone but touched her like she was made of spun glass. One day at a time, one moment at a time, however long it takes. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, and Lyria felt the last of her walls crumble. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear and hope and desperate longing into the touch. And when they finally parted, she was smiling through her tears. Your mother is going to be insufferable about this, she said. Dristan laughed, the sound rich and warm and full of joy. She's been planning our mating ceremony since the day you saved her life. Of course she has, Lyria replied, and she couldn't find it in herself to be annoyed. They walked back to the royal grounds together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. And for the first time in her life, Lyria Moonthorn didn't feel incomplete. She felt whole. The months that followed were the happiest Lyria had ever known. She moved into the royal grounds at Selka's delighted insistence, and Dristan courted her with a patience and devotion that left her breathless. He brought her wildflowers from the forest. He listened when she talked about her mother. He held her through nightmares and made her laugh until her sides hurt. To the pack, he remained the Alpha King, fierce and commanding and utterly uncompromising. But with her, he was simply Dristan, hers. Selka watched their love grow with joy that made her seem years younger. She planned and schemed and fussed over every detail, determined to see them properly mated before her time came. But time, as always, had its own plans. It started with small things. Selka forgetting words mid-sentence, stumbling when she walked, a cough that wouldn't quite go away. Lyria noticed first, her healer's training making her sensitive to the subtle signs of decline. She's getting worse, she told Dristan one night as they lay together in his chambers. I can see it, even if she tries to hide it. Dristan's arms tightened around her. I know. I've known for weeks. But she won't hear of slowing down or resting. She says she has too much life left to live. She wants to see us mated, Lyria said softly. She wants to know you're not alone before she goes. She won't be going anywhere for a long time, Dristan said fiercely. But there was desperation beneath the words. Lyria said nothing, just held him as he struggled with the reality they both knew was coming. They were mated on the first day of autumn, beneath a sky painted in shades of amber and gold. Selka insisted on being present despite her frailty, and she wept tears of joy as she watched her son bind his life to the woman who had saved them both. My children, she whispered, holding their joined hands. My beautiful children. Winter came early that year, and with it, the final decline. Selka grew weaker day by day, her body finally surrendering to the weight of years and illness. Lyria barely left her side, using every skill she possessed to ease the old woman's pain and bring her comfort. Dristan would join them in the evenings, sitting on Selka's other side, and they would talk quietly about everything and nothing. Selka seemed at peace, content in a way that spoke of a life well lived and a death faced without fear. I'm not afraid, she told them one night when the moon was dark and the stars blazed with cold fire. I've been blessed beyond measure. I was saved when I should have died. I found a daughter when I thought that joy was lost to me forever. I saw my son find love with a woman worthy of him. What more could I possibly ask for? More time, Dristan said, his voice breaking. I want more time with you." "Time is a gift, my son, not a right," Selka replied gently. "And I've been given more than I deserved." She turned her eyes to Lyria. "Promise me you'll take care of him. He acts so strong, but he needs someone to remind him that it's all right to be vulnerable." "I promise," Lyria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And promise me you'll let yourself be happy," Selka continued. "You've spent so much of your life alone and hurting. Let that be over now. Let yourself be loved without fear." "I promise," Lyria said again. Selka smiled. "Then I can rest easy." She died 3 days later, just as the first snow began to fall. She passed peacefully in her sleep, her hand held in Lyria's, her son's presence a warm weight on her other side. There were no cries of anguish, no dramatic farewells. Just the quiet end of a life that had touched so many, and the gentle grief of those left behind. They buried her on a hill overlooking the forest, beneath an ancient oak that had stood for centuries. The entire pack came to pay their respects to their beloved matriarch, and stories were shared of her kindness, her wisdom, her fierce protection of those she loved. Lyria stood beside Dristan as they lowered Selka into the earth, her hand gripped tightly in his. She felt his grief like it was her own, the loss of the woman who had been mother to them both. But beneath the sorrow, there was gratitude. Gratitude for the time they had been given, for the love that had been shared, for the family that had been forged from choice and circumstance. "She gave us to each other," Dristan said softly as the last of the mourners departed. "Her final gift." "She gave me a mother when I had none," Lyria replied. "And she gave you a mate who understands that love isn't about power or politics, but about choosing each other every day." Dristan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I miss her already." "So do I," Lyria whispered. "But she's not really gone. She's in every kind word we speak, every act of compassion we show. She's in the love we share. That's how we keep her alive." They stood together as snow began to fall in earnest, two souls who had found each other through tragedy and transformed it into something beautiful. Lyria Moonthorn, who had never shifted until the moment she refused to lose another mother. Dristan Dawnshadow, who had learned that true strength lay not in dominance, but in devotion. Winter passed into spring, and life continued. Lyria took her place as the pack's healer, using the knowledge Selka had shared to tend to the sick and injured. Dristan ruled with a wisdom tempered by loss and love, and together they built a kingdom founded on compassion rather than fear. On the anniversary of Selka's death, they returned to her grave beneath the oak. The tree had bloomed early that year, its branches heavy with white flowers that seemed to glow in the afternoon light. "Look," Lyria said, pointing to a young sapling growing beside the grave. "It wasn't there before." Dristan knelt beside it, touching the tender leaves with reverent fingers. "A gift," he said. "One last gift from her to us." They tended the sapling carefully, and it grew strong and true, its roots intertwining with the ancient oak. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Lyria could swear she heard Selka's laughter in the rustling leaves, warm and full of joy. Years passed. The young oak grew tall and strong, and beneath its branches, Lyria and Dristan raised their own children. They told stories of the grandmother the little ones had never met, of her courage and kindness, and the love that had saved a kingdom. The first child was a girl with her mother's white hair and her father's dark eyes. They named her Selka, and from her first breath, she carried the fierce gentleness of the woman whose name she bore. The second was a boy, strong and brave, who shifted for the first time at age 5 and immediately ran to his mother to show her his wolf. "Look, Mama!" he cried, his young wolf clumsily circling her legs. "I have a wolf like you!" Lyria can-elt and ran her fingers through his silver fur, her heart full to bursting. Yes, you do, my love. And what a beautiful wolf he is. The third child was another girl, quiet and thoughtful, who loved to spend hours beneath the twin oaks, talking to the grandmother she'd never met as if Selka could hear every word. Sometimes Lyria would find her there, whispering secrets to the wind, and her heart would ache with love and loss in equal measure. Dryston was a devoted father, fierce in his protection, but gentle in his guidance. He taught their children to be strong without being cruel, to lead with compassion, to understand that true power came not from dominance but from the willingness to serve those who depended on them. And at night, when the children were asleep, he would hold Lyria in their chambers and whisper his gratitude for the life they had built together. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked one night, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her skin. "Choosing this life? You could have stayed in your cottage, lived quietly without all the complications of being queen." "Not for a single moment," Lyria replied, turning to face him. "This life has pain, yes, loss, but it also has so much love, so much joy. I wouldn't trade it for anything." "Even when the council drives you mad with their endless debates?" Lyria laughed. "Even then. Though I reserve the right to complain extensively about Elder Gareth and his obsession with proper protocol." Dryston pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I love you," he said quietly. "More now than I did on our mating day, and I thought that was impossible." "Love grows," Lyria replied. "It deepens. Every challenge we face together, every joy we share, it all becomes part of the foundation. We're building something that will outlast us both." "Like the oaks," Dryston said. "Like the oaks," Lyria agreed. They had established traditions over the years. Every spring, on the anniversary of Selka's death, the entire pack would gather at the Twin Oaks. They would share stories, sing songs, and plant new saplings in honor of those they had lost. The forest around Selka's grave had become a living memorial, dozens of young trees reaching toward the sky, each one representing a life remembered, and a love that endured. Lyria would speak at these gatherings, her voice carrying across the crowd. She would talk about the woman who had chosen her as a daughter, about the love that had transformed them both, about the gift of family that transcended blood. "She taught me that being broken is not the same as being incomplete," Lyria would say. "She taught me that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be vulnerable with those who have earned our trust. She taught me that family is built through choice and devotion, not obligation and tradition." The pack would listen, and many would weep, remembering their own losses and the people who had shaped them. And when Lyria finished speaking, they would plant the new saplings together, each person contributing to the forest of memory. Dryston remained the fierce alpha king to the world, commanding and powerful, his word law and his judgment final. But with Lyria and their children, he was simply Dryston, a man who sang silly songs to make his daughters laugh, a father who taught his son to fish in the nearby stream, a husband who brought his mate wildflowers for no reason other than knowing they would make her smile. The duality never ceased to amaze those who witnessed it. Council members who had seen him tear apart enemies with ruthless efficiency would watch in shock as he carefully braided his daughter's hair, or patiently explained the healing properties of various herbs to his youngest child because she had expressed interest in following her mother's path. "How do you do it?" one of his advisors asked once. "How do you balance being what the pack needs and what your family needs?" Dryston had looked at the man with something close to pity. "They're not separate things," he replied. "Being a good king means being a good man first. If I can't protect and nurture my own family, how can I be trusted with an entire kingdom? Everything I do, every decision I make, it all comes back to creating a world where those I love can thrive." As the children grew, they each developed their own relationships with their mother's past. Young Selka would ask endless questions about the grandmother she was named for, wanting to know every detail, every story. She studied healing arts with her mother and showed a gift for diplomacy that would serve the pack well in years to come. The boy, whom they had named Theron, inherited his father's warrior spirit, but his mother's compassion. He trained relentlessly, but was quick to defend the weak, and never used his strength to bully or intimidate. And the youngest, Alara, the quiet one who spoke to the wind beneath the oaks, developed a connection to the old magic that ran through their bloodline. Her eyes would sometimes glow with golden light, and she could sense things others couldn't. Curses and blessings, old magic and new. She could feel them all like others felt temperature or texture. "Mama," she said one day when she was 7, sitting beneath the twin oaks with Lyria at her side. "Grandmother Selka is happy. I can feel it. She's proud of us." Lyria's breath caught. "Can you really feel her?" Alara nodded solemnly. "She's in the trees, in the wind, in the earth. Not like a ghost, more like her love became part of everything. Like she's woven into the world now." Tears spilled down Lyria's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "Thank you for telling me that, little one." "She says to tell you that you were always whole," Alara continued, her young voice taking on a strange, distant quality, "that your wolf was waiting for the moment when you would need it most, and that she's grateful every day that you heard her scream." Lyria pulled her daughter close, holding her while she wept. The weight she had carried for so long, the question of whether she had done enough, loved enough, been enough, finally lifted. Selka was at peace, and through that peace, Lyria found her own. The kingdom prospered under Drystan's rule. He led with wisdom and compassion, never forgetting the lessons his mother had taught him or the example his mate set every day. The pack grew strong, not through fear, but through loyalty. Not through dominance, but through mutual respect and care. And at the center of it all was Lyria, the woman who had never shifted until love gave her a reason. She became legend in her own right, the golden wolf whose first transformation had saved the beloved matriarch. Healers sought her out for training. Young women who felt broken or incomplete would come to her, and she would tell them her story, showing them that their worth was not determined by when or how their wolves emerged, but by the strength of their hearts and the courage of their choices. "I was 23 years old before I shifted," she would tell them. 23 years of being told I was defective, broken, less than. But my wolf was never missing. It was simply waiting. Waiting for the moment when I would need it most, when the stakes were high enough and the love was deep enough that transformation became inevitable. She would look at these young women, seeing herself in their uncertain eyes, their desperate hope. "Your worth is not defined by your wolf. It's defined by who you are, how you love, what you're willing to fight for. The rest is just details." Many of these women went on to become powerful members of the pack, contributing in ways that had nothing to do with their ability to shift. Healers, teachers, strategists, artists. They built lives of meaning and purpose, and they never forgot the queen who had shown them that being different didn't mean being less. Lyria never forgot the woman who had chosen her as a daughter. Every decision she made, every person she helped, every moment of compassion she showed. It was all rooted in the lessons Selka had taught her. That love was a choice. That family was built through devotion. That sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the permission to be loved exactly as they are. When Lyria's own hair had turned silver with age, when her hands were gnarled with arthritis but still gentle in their healing touch, when her face bore the lines of a life well lived and deeply felt, she would still visit the twin oaks. She would sit beneath their branches, her back against the trunk, and she would talk to Selka as if the old woman were sitting right beside her. "The forest is beautiful today," she would say. "The autumn leaves are at their peak, all gold and crimson. You would have loved it. Drystan sends his love, though his joints ache more than he'd ever admit. Stubborn man. I wonder where he gets that from. She would laugh then, imagining Selka's knowing smile. The children are well. Your granddaughter is reforming the council structure, making it more inclusive. Your grandson just became a father himself. Can you believe it? You're a great-grandmother now. And Alara, she says she can still feel you in this place. She says your love never left, that it soaked into the earth and the trees and the very air we breathe. Lyria would pause, listening to the wind rustle through the leaves. I miss you, she would whisper. Even after all these years, I miss you. But I'm grateful. So grateful for the time we had, for the love you showed me, for teaching me that I was never broken. Just waiting. Always waiting for the moment when I would finally become who I was meant to be. Drystan would find her there eventually, moving slowly but steadily, his own body bearing the marks of age, but his eyes still sharp and full of love. He would lower himself carefully to sit beside her, and she would lean into his warmth, their wolves content and quiet within them. Talking to her again? He would ask gently. Always, Lyria would reply. She's part of me now, part of us. Every good thing in my life traces back to that moment in the forest when I refused to let her die. She would be proud of you, Drystan would say, of what you've built, who you've become. She would be proud of us both, Lyria would correct. We honored her legacy. We built something worth having, worth fighting for. We loved each other and our children and our pack with everything we had. That's what she wanted for us. To be happy. To be whole. They would sit in comfortable silence, watching the sun set through the branches of the twin oaks. And in those moments, the years would fall away. Lyria would remember the girl she had been, frightened and alone, convinced she was broken beyond repair. And she would marvel at the woman she had become, confident and loved, surrounded by family and purpose. The transformation had not been just physical, not just the rising of her wolf in a moment of desperate need. The true transformation had been internal, a gradual awakening to the truth that she had always been enough, had always been whole, had simply been waiting for the love and courage to claim it. Selka had given her that gift. The gift of being seen, of being valued, of being loved without condition or reservation. And in accepting that gift, Lyria had learned to love herself, to recognize her own worth, to understand that the greatest strength was not in standing alone, but in having the courage to let others in. As twilight deepened into night and the stars began to emerge, Drystan would help Lyria to her feet, and they would walk slowly back to their home. Behind them, the twin oaks would stand sentinel, their roots deep and intertwined, their branches reaching toward the heavens, a living monument to the love that had saved them all. And on the wind, if you listened carefully, you could sometimes hear the sound of gentle laughter, warm and full of joy, as if an old woman was watching her children return home and finding it good. She had been alone for so long, convinced that she was broken and incomplete. But Selka had seen the truth that Lyria herself had been blind to. She wasn't broken. She had simply been waiting for the moment when her strength would be needed most, waiting for the family that would choose her as fiercely as she chose them. And when her wolf had finally risen, blazing with golden light and ancient power, it hadn't been born of anger or desperation. It had been born of love. The same love that had saved an old woman in a cursed forest. The same love that had healed the heart of a lonely king. The same love that had transformed a girl who thought herself incomplete into a woman who was whole. On quiet nights, when the children were asleep and the moon hung heavy in the sky, Lyria would stand beneath the twin oaks and remember. Remember the scream that had changed everything. Remember the golden light of her first transformation. Remember Selka's hands holding hers as the old woman took her last breath, and she would whisper into the darkness, words of gratitude and love and eternal remembrance. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for showing me that I was never broken, only waiting. I carry you with me always, in every heartbeat, in every breath. You gave me a family when I had none, a purpose when I felt lost, and a love that will endure long after my bones have turned to dust. Rest well, mother of my heart. Your daughter remembers. Your daughter loves. Your daughter lives the life you dreamed for her. And it is beautiful. The wind would sigh through the leaves in response, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the promise of spring. And Lyria would smile, knowing that some bonds transcended death, that some love was so fierce and true that not even the grave could diminish it. She had never shifted once in life, until her wolf rose to save the Alpha King's missing matriarch. But that first transformation had been more than the awakening of her power. It had been the awakening of her heart. The moment when she learned that true strength came not from standing alone, but from having the courage to love and be loved in return. Selka Dawnshadow had been lost in a cursed forest, pursued by nightmares and certain she would die alone and forgotten. But she had been found by a woman with white hair and a red dress and a heart that refused to accept loss as inevitable. And in saving Selka, Lyria had saved herself. That was the real magic. Not the golden light, or the ancient bloodline, or the power that had shattered cursed skeletons to dust. The real magic was the transformation that happened when two lonely souls found each other in the darkness and decided that love was worth the risk of loss. It was the magic of a mother and daughter choosing each other across the barriers of blood and circumstance. It was the magic of a king learning to be vulnerable with the one person who saw him as simply a man. It was the magic of a woman who thought herself broken, discovering that she had always been whole, just waiting for the right moment to bloom. Selka had lived to see her family made complete. She had died knowing that her son would never be alone, that the woman she loved as a daughter would guard his heart as fiercely as she had once guarded Selka's life. She had left behind a legacy not of conquest or power, but of love that rippled outward through generations, touching every life it encountered. And Lyria, who had spent so many years convinced that she was meant to walk through life alone, had learned the most important truth of all. She had never been alone. Not really. She had been waiting for the forest to call her. Waiting for the scream that would change everything. Waiting for the golden light to rise from the depths of her soul and show her what she had always been. Not broken, not incomplete, not less than those who had shifted easily and early. She was Lyria Moonthorn, healer, daughter, mate, mother, the woman who had never shifted once in life until love gave her a reason to transform, the woman whose wolf blazed with the light of ancient suns and whose heart burned even brighter. And she was exactly who she was always meant to be. Beneath the twin oaks, where Selka's bones rested in the earth and new life grew strong and true, that truth resonated like a bell. It sang through the packlands, carried on winds that smelled of wildflowers and home. It whispered through generations yet to come, a promise that love would always be stronger than loss, that family was built through choice and devotion, and that sometimes the greatest transformations came not with thunder and lightning, but with a quiet certainty that you were finally, irrevocably, home. The moonlight painted silver patterns across the graves and the living alike. Drystan emerged from the shadows, drawn by instinct to the place where his wife stood keeping vigil. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder, and together they stood in comfortable silence. "Do you think she knows?" Lyria asked softly. "How much we miss her. How much her love still shapes everything we do." "I think she knows," Drystan replied. "I think she's been watching over us since the moment she closed her eyes. And I think she's proud of what we've built." Lyria leaned back into his embrace, letting his warmth chase away the chill of the night air. "I used to think I was cursed," she admitted. "That my inability to shift meant I was somehow less than everyone else. But if I had shifted earlier, I wouldn't have been in that forest. I wouldn't have heard her scream. I wouldn't have met her or you or found this life. Maybe some things are meant to unfold exactly as they do," Dryston said. "Maybe you were always meant to find her, and through her, find us." "Maybe," Lyria agreed. "Or maybe we make our own meaning from the chaos. Either way, I'm grateful." They stood together until the moon began to set, casting the world into the deep blue of pre-dawn. The twin oaks rustled gently in the breeze, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, its voice carrying notes of joy and sorrow and everything in between. Life continued. Love endured. And beneath the earth, wrapped in roots and memory, Selka Dawnshadow rested in peace, knowing that the woman who had saved her life had been saved in return, not from death or danger or the cruelty of fate, but from loneliness, from the belief that she was unworthy of love, from the fear that kept her isolated and aching. Selka had given Lyria the greatest gift of all, not gratitude or status or a place in the royal family. She had given her permission to be loved, to be seen, to be whole exactly as she was. And that gift, more than any golden light or ancient power, was the truest magic in the world. The dawn broke soft and gentle, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Lyria and Dryston walked hand in hand back to the heart of their territory, where their children would soon wake demanding breakfast and stories and all the beautiful chaos of family life. Behind them, the twin oaks stood sentinel over the grave of a woman who had been lost and found, who had saved a kingdom not through strength or strategy, but through the simple act of loving a broken girl enough to help her become whole. And in the space between heartbeats, in the whisper of wind through leaves, in the golden light that sometimes flickered at the edge of vision, Selka smiled. Her children were happy, her legacy secure, her love eternal. What more could any mother ask for? Nothing at all. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.